Give it to us raw.
So
That
first,
sounds wrong, but
and it's really nice to be a part. I watch quite often, and so it's really nice to be a part of this. Um, uh, I come probably from a different spectrum. I am quite older than all of you, and I was with my ex-husband for 24 years. We got divorced at 22 years of marriage, and after the divorce was over, I realized that I was not safe to love. And the reason that I say that I was not safe is because there were things about me that I knew that were happening emotionally and mentally prior to my marriage that I reasoned away spiritually, right? So I thought that I could, that the Lord would do some things in my heart so that the marriage would be all right. And so actually, the marriage was more of a cover than it was a covenant. And so it became this place where I could hide, so I thought, the things that I really needed to work on prior to the marriage. And so, the first probably maybe 5 to 10 years of our marriage was pretty good. But come year 11 and going forward, we started to have some problems because the emotional things that were going on with me started to show up. And usually they show up in crisis, right? So when money got tight, or when, uh, I thought he wasn't doing right, I thought he was not hearing me, I thought that he was mishandling my emotions, right? That's what I would call it. He was mishandling my emotions. Um, I just became this person that was angry. I was like Dahlia, I would rage. And there was no middle ground with me. It was either good or real good, or it was really bad. And I just turned into this kind of wife that emasculated my husband with his word, with my words. Things would happen with us, and I'd call my sister-in-law on the phone and I'd talk about him like he was nothing and nobody. And I came to understand that while there were some things that he did, right, because it takes two people to be married, and no one comes into the marriage perfect. What I did understand is that I didn't want to own the things that I was doing, because it was easier to say that if you didn't do this, I would not have done that. And it just became this real, come on, Sean, wave at me. So it,
Yo, you,
right?
Andrea, I
That's
got a tear in my eye that's ready, like a thug tear right there. You're preaching a word. I'm sorry to interrupt you,
that's
but go
okay.
ahead.
And so it just became this cycle of this going back and forth. And when I thought I was doing the right things and I thought we were in a good place, then all of a sudden something would happen to change that. And then we just kind of went with this tug and pull and tug and pull. And believe it or not, it went on for quite a long time. Eventually, my mom got ill. She came to live with us. She was with us for 3 years. She passed away. And after my mom passed away, everything just fell apart because I became so consumed with everything else than him. And he said it. He said to me that he didn't feel needed. Now, this came after, let me just give a little bit of background. So, after my mom passed away in 2011, during the time that she was with us and I was caregiving giving for her, I had stopped working. Um, and basically, he was the provider for the home. But I had always worked through our marriage. This was probably the first time that I had never worked. And so, we were doing a lot, and, financially it started to take a tug, and, and emotionally too, because it was really hard to watch her be this vibrant person and then just to start to decline. And I just felt like at some point in time, he kind of fell out of it because at first we were doing it together. But at some point in time, he just kind of like fell off. And I didn't understand why. And then eventually what happened is after my mom passed away, he started to talk to a coworker. And I've heard you talk about it, Kojo, about how coworkers are dangerous. And they are. You know, when you're in a vulnerable space, the coworker seems like the only person that gets it, right? They're the one that understands everything, they feel you, all of that. So he started to begin to have conversations with this coworker. And from what I know, what I come to find out, I don't think anything ever physically happened with them, but there was something emotional that happened with them. And so eventually we got to this place where, I caught them talking a couple times, and, I had a womanly conversation with her and told her, stop calling my husband. And that did cease. And so one night we're having this conversation, and I asked him, I said, what was it? What was it? And it's a very hard conversation for a woman to have. When you ask your man, what was it about this person that drew him away from you? And so I asked him the question, and he said, because she needed me. And when he said, because she needed me, that thing just broke my heart. Now, I asked the question and I wanted an honest answer, but it broke my heart because here I was feeling, well, I needed you too. I needed you at a very difficult point. And what do you mean you was she needed you? But what I failed to realize in the marriage was that I hadn't really done a good job of balancing between what was happening with my mom and what was happening with my marriage. Sometimes in marriage, we inadvertently think that our spouse is just supposed to understand and keep moving along. And sometimes that's difficult to do. And I think that you have to learn how to acknowledge when your spouse is at a place when they don't have so much to give. Doesn't mean that they don't love you, don't mean that they don't think you are a good spouse. But there's just this situation that's happening that they're having a hard time with too. And you and your own thing or what you're feeling, you can become selfish. And so what happened was the communication broke down with us at that point, and things just started to just they just started to dissipate. And we had a hard time bringing it back together. We did the counseling at the church. I would get angry at the counseling because I felt like he wouldn't be honest, but I wasn't being honest either because in the counseling I covered him because I wouldn't say to the pastor really what he was doing. I just wanted it to be fixed, so I could feel better. But I covered him and I didn't really say things that were happening. So that didn't help at all. And so eventually it just got to a point where um, it, we couldn't do it. We couldn't communicate anymore. And I stayed in for as long as I thought it was going to work. Um, and I did the Christian thing. I prayed and fasted and read my word and said, God, what's going to happen here. And it took me a long time to get to the thought process that of divorce. Um, because I wanted it to work. I didn't want to feel like a failure. I'm supposed to be the woman of God and I'm supposed to know the word and I'm supposed to be able to fix it. I'm supposed to have that prayer that's going to touch his heart and, make things move. And, ooh, we're going to go give a testimony about, the goodness of God. But it didn't happen that way. I felt um, like Else, I think is her name Elsie, like she said, obligated. I felt obligated at a certain point because I just didn't want to fail anybody. And in particularly God. Divorce is that thing that they say, God hates divorce. But I started to feel like, well, does God hate that my heart hurts? Does God hate that I'm miserable? Does God hate that I don't feel loved? Does God hate that I'm angry all the time? Does God hate that I'm frustrated all the time? And so we just eventually got to the point where it it just was not working. And so, we started to go into these different areas. And during the midst of this time now, when we're going to these different areas, I started doing some self reflecting and some work on myself. And so I started writing this book called Restored Such a Woman. And I thought it was a journal. I thought it was going to be like this little journal thing. And I'm going to, talk to women about how to be encouraged. And it really just became a journal for myself. I talked about, how I had been molested from 11 to 13, which affected the intimacy in my marriage, which I didn't know that it would, but it did. Um, and I started to write that book, and it just really started to help me understand who I was and what was happening with me. And as I started writing that book, I started to change. And so now, as I'm starting to change, and I'm saying, okay, I can do different. I can communicate better. I can talk to you better. I can do things better. But then it also started to create this thing in me where I wanted to do other things. I wanted to keep writing. I wanted to become a speaker. I just wanted to start doing all of these things. And now he's feeling like, oh, she's better. But he still wanted to do church on Sunday, this on the weekend, and we go to work every day and we come home and that's it. And that now became not enough for me. And so eventually, um, he filed for divorce because he saw my changing. And he said to me, I feel like I'm in your way. So I have to say that my prayer was, God, I want you to fix it. However, I know that you hear me when I pray. So either you will fix it or I ask that you release me, because I wasn't going to file. I'm going to be very honest with you. I wasn't going to file. And I said, God, either you will fix it or you will release me. And when he came to me with the divorce papers, I received that as being released. And I signed them and I moved on. Here I am now. I got divorced in 2016 and it is now 2023. Um, I learned how to communicate. I learned how to understand me. I came to understand that healing um, is a real thing. It's not a magic pill, but what it does help you to do, it helps you to objectively and maturely examine your own self, right? I learned how to separate rejection from um, constructive criticism, because I dealt with rejection a lot. And so everything I heard was through that filter. So in the healing, I learned how to change the filter. I learned how to not hear things through being hurt, through being angry, through being enraged. Because when you're in those spaces and all of those emotions are working, you're hearing things that people are not saying. Um, and so it for me, it's been a journey. It really has, and I've learned a lot of things. Um, I am now engaged to be married again. Um, I have I've been in a relationship for 4 years, and in this 4 years, I've really come to understand how to treat him like a man, how to hear what he says, how to not hear what he says through my emotions, how that if I feel like I'm hearing something through his emotions, that I don't say anything at all. I don't respond. Um, and I've learned how to use like little things. I think it was Sammy was saying a little tricks, right? I'm not going to use the word tricks either, but I'm going to say there are little things that I've learned how to use when we're having conversations and I'm not sure of what he's saying. I'll say things like, um, let me see if I heard you correctly. And then I'll repeat what he says. So then I know that that's what he said. Or I will say, if he's done something and it really hurt my feelings, I'll say to him, I need to share my heart with you. And I begin to share whatever that is. Or if I didn't get it, I'll say, help me understand. And what I found in doing those things is that when I say those buffers like that, it gives me a couple of minutes to get myself together before he responds so that I don't respond like in a way where I'm off or I'm really loud or I'm doing too much or I'm saying too much. Um, I heard Elsie say something about submission, and I just wanted to throw this in about submission is that, I don't have a problem with submission. Um, I just didn't know how to operate in it when I was married, but I don't have a problem with it. The only concern that I have in submission and what I feel like is that submission is for a level of relationship, and that level is marriage. As a Christian, that's what I believe. And I think that what when people get in trouble with it, they get in trouble with it because they're attempting to deal with it in a level of relationship that it's not designed for. You're not designed as a woman to submit to your boyfriend. You're designed to submit to your husband. Your husband is designed to lead the family first spiritually. So if he is not leading spiritually first, that means that he's leading out of his own heart. And a woman will always be afraid to follow a man who leads out of his own heart because she has to hope that he's doing the right thing. But if you are following a man who is following God, then that means now she puts her faith in him going to God for whatever is going to happen to the family. And now she can follow him and not do it afraid. And there were times in my marriage that I followed my ex husband afraid. And that fear showed up in me